Hello, and welcome to the A. Marie Speaks podcast, where I'm talking about all things introspection, spirituality, and happiness. On today's episode, I am going to be doing another audio version of a blog I recently wrote, and along with some side commentary and just some points of contemplation around this topic, because I myself am struggling with the amount of darkness, I guess, out there. And I know there's so many of us who are like-minded and who are tired of the nonsense. So, in a way of offering assistance when we feel so depleted, I am reigniting this blog I wrote about the slippery slopes of rabbit holes and how we could seek truth, not shadows. This is a large topic, and like all things, it is multifaceted and just a template, right, that we are allowed to work with. And so during this podcast here, I am going to be referring to truth with a capital T, and that in itself is kind of a discussion all on its own. It's a double-edged sword, but there is a real honest knowing, an undeniable notion that truth exists and that it resides out there separate from each of us. Just like our consciousness does not technically reside in our body vessel, our memories, our thought world, right, happens outside of the physical body. There's the imagination space is what I like to call it, right? Or the great library. Some people see it as the book where all things are written, right? Or the Akashic records. There's so many versions out there of it. But anyways, what my point being is that the truth with a capital T is and does always exist untainted out there somewhere in that imagination space. And having or being able to tap into faith in that really is where we need to be rooted in, I guess is what I'm trying to get through. Especially people who might be like-minded, like me, and seek these quote-unquote conspiracies out, or look to see what is hidden in plain sight and ask why. Some of us are just came here awake, and we just know everything's a trick and a trap. Doesn't seem right. It's upside down and backwards here on this prison planet. And that really fuels such a deep seeking for truth. And it's at the root of that slave-master cycle that I talk about so often, when we create things and we infuse them with slavery in a negative charge, negatively aligned orientation of creation. We are forcing, just like we have forced upon us, this idea of a creator that we must seek out, we must find and define for ourselves. am not trying to discourage seeking, and I'm definitely not trying to say there's no worth in alternatives um, or even in the mainstream explanations, you know. All items should be explored and examined, from my opinion. However, staying rooted and grounded in love and light is really the challenge at hand, right? Because it's so easy to immediately get lost in the rabbit holes and to dig yourself down into deep tunnels and to lose the way, lose the light, become engulfed in the need for answers. And that in itself, like I've talked about numerous times, you know, can be a whole trap of the matrix in itself, in this mind control, to keep the intelligent ones or the more closely to awakening beings looped in the chasing their own tail, basically, right? Keeping us distracted and expending our energy and our light in a rabbit hole somewhere that is ultimately feeding a negative being at the end of the day, a negative energy or entity polarity collection, whatever you want to envision this cloud of the negative agenda, right? We're ultimately feeding that side of the scale when we're doing this kind of desperate seeking of answers. We must know the truth. That in itself is really restrictive and forceful, right? We should notice that it's negatively charged. Even though maybe, you know, we might look inside and the deepest intentions are trying to be rooted in sovereign truth, the negative energies of forcing to be known and shown the truth has a negative alignment to it. And so if instead, you know, we can do a type of seeking that shines light out and holds light and space for the shadow to just be seen and accepted within first, then we might be able to do more clearing and actually find solutions that work. But I think there's a lot of steps in between there, and there's a lot of conscious awareness, growth, maturity, emotional intelligence kind of evolution that really needs to be filled in a bit before the collective can get there. But some of us are there, and some of us are doing the working, and I'm hoping that there's people out there who are listening who are perhaps tired of chasing their tail in negatively aligned rabbit holes, who do say, wait a minute, I do want to pull back and actually seek my honest truth. I do want to do positively aligned seeking of real truth for myself. How do I do that? What does that even look like? Right? And there's those conversations I've had with myself, and I continue to have with myself, because the mainstream underground research, the dark web, all the hackers and the anons and the people out there, the conspiracy theorists and all the seekers out there, the truthers, whatever you want to call yourself, you know, come from the same fire. You know, we're cut from the same cloth. We want, quote unquote, justice. We want clarity and acceptance for what is, so that we could actually seek solutions that work, instead of, you know, putting false hope and faith into these solutions we know are built on faulty ground and gonna fall apart. What's the point in that? So many of us are tired of watching the mainstream collective build these houses of cards, they fall down, build up these places of negativity, and then wonder why they implode on themselves. build up these plantation systems of tyranny and wonder why there's a revolt always happening. It's the same thing over and over again. The tyrant template at play. The negative system refusing to acknowledge its one major fault. Sorry, but your truth is built upon a lie. And so all truths you think you find are false or have falsity in them, because your initial response to life is a distortion of truth. And so you can never find truth from that angle. But yeah, that's a lesson that takes a lot of working, a lot of backfiring and catalysts and disruptions to be presented with in your own working time space, to come to your own conclusions of that value of worth and sovereignty. At the end of the day, if you're choosing a negative alignment, you haven't found that lesson yet. You haven't got that key. And so, yeah, you can't walk through the door yet. But the more and more that we show through, action and speech and choice and love and dedication and patience, that, we each have our own key, and here's the door. You can find yours and walk through yours. Look, I'm doing it, right? That's what the true seekers of light, the light workers, the truthers out there, white hats, whatever you want to call these people who are benevolent, we should be focusing on, and we should be working to present to the negative always, that angle. Wait a minute, let's pull it back to the original sin here, and not the false, not the made up makeup version of the original sin, but the true notion of that turning your back on yourself, turning your back on God, on source creation. That is the original sin. But anyways, getting a tad bit off topic. Quite typical for myself, but I did want to give a little preamble, because I wrote this blog just a little while back, a couple of weeks ago maybe. August 7th I put this out. So I've had different ruminations over this, and I've been doing a lot of alchemy, light and shadow work, and some digging around with the negative agenda on my own time in the present moment since I wrote this blog. And so I just wanted to just touch a bit on that progress of thought that I have been unwrapping since I wrote this. But with that little preamble, I think I'll get started on reading the blog that I wrote, which the title was Slippery Slopes and Rabbit Holes: How to Seek Truth, Not Shadows. Recently, I've talked about the 3D matrix, archons, the negative agenda, and also lineage, mothering, our ancestors, and our own role as future ancestors. It's only natural that we now look at how these concepts interact, influence each other, and what the overall purpose could be. It doesn't take a genius to see things are set up quite backwards here. Just look at the plain picture of the world and your life within it. You're born into a family which is already cemented into a societal structuring of some kind. You inherit the restrictions and conditions of your parents and society at that time and place. Already, it looks like the chips are stacked against you, as far as free thinking and sovereignty go, at least, right? Then comes in the programming, especially from the 3D matrix, or rather the negative overlay that's happening within the 3D matrix, right? Then comes in the programming that in order to survive here, you must pay, right? All things here are limited and must be fought over or hoarded. The mammoth debt-based slavery cycle of the matrix and the negative agenda relies solely on the masses and their submission of their own energy. In order to make this machine run smoothly as possible, the masses or the users must completely submit to the authority of the cycle or system, right? You're not going to, say, walk into a school as a student and think, you get to choose, make all the choices and run the show and decide how the school schedule runs. Or you're not going to go into the police force and think you're going to rewrite the way that your town's police force runs or something. That's not why you go into a system. You walk into that building knowing your role. You know you're a user to follow directions within that system. In order to avoid this trap, never subjugate your sovereignty. And I talk about this a lot with this inversion of sovereignty turning into servitude, right? They trick us into giving up or putting our sovereign worth as a human with this amazing gift of life. We put that on hold, sort of, and pick up this cloak of servitude, which basically says, I agree to subjugate myself and my energy, my time, and my worth to this purpose here, this system, this school, this job, whatever the case may be. You are saying, by consenting and being a part of that system, yes, I agree. I am worth less than the system as a whole. I am agreeing to follow instructions and directions and play my role that the system has defined for me while I'm in your building, while I hold this job, while I'm getting my education, whatever the case may be. And that in itself is a great trick, right? And that's why I'm saying, to avoid that trap in general, always hold your sovereign worth. And this is why that first battle for control, or that first, the original sin, or whatever I was calling it at the very beginning, right? The first battle for control centers around the removal of an individual's spiritual connection. Because no being who recognizes itself and its fellow beings as sovereign would disgrace that gift of power by diminishing it down to this servitude status, a subjugation of your sovereignty. That in itself is a negative trade. You are putting yourself in the red, so to speak, with that action. The system, of course, has built up such clever sleights of hand and traps, loops and lassos to keep people feeding. So beware of your choices and the intention you hold while making them. Discernment and intuition are critical in this war on consciousness. If you seek to exit and assist in the dismantling of the matrix, just know that, yes, seeking the truths behind the conspiracies has its role. It has an importance about it. There is a thin, very personal line that rules the energy of choice points and intention of decision. You ultimately have the say of every single thing that runs through your mind. Your thoughts harness weight within the ether and create the reality you experience at every moment. You are a powerful, energetic body inserted into this 340 matrix world to learn choice and polarity, to explore good and bad, and learn soul lessons. Never let another being trick you into subverting your power to anything outside of yourself. Once more humans learn or remember about their sovereignty and practice it for themselves within their own worlds, we will start to see this negative agenda, the 3D matrix, fade out very fast. For the moment, however, the learning curve is lagging behind my current view. Such is the case of my life. I tend to be a loner, as I'm sure many of you out there listening probably feel the same. A majority of humanity, though, in 2022 is rounding a bend that I crossed maybe 2 decades ago. And then still a crowd is pulling up the rear of this S-curve, just catching on to things that I felt from my very start here on Earth. It never ceases to amaze me to see the spectrum of conscious growth propelling humanity. It makes me so grateful for the years of digging that I was able to do. I was born on a 7-day in a 7-year, and so I have always been an information magnet. I collect, run through, absorb, and store stuff just as naturally as some people play an instrument. Over time, and tons of trial and error type of searching, I sensed my way through the truther world, and lucky enough, I had begun this trek at least, back in maybe 2008. Perhaps even before that. I mean, the 9/11 was a huge waking point for me in my life, but I was young. I was maybe 14, 13, I forget, but I was a young teenager at the time, and so it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I could really see the bigger picture forming, for what it is, put the pieces together and all that. But I'm not going to get into my personal history now, but I wanted to shed some light on the underlying fact that I do value rabbit holes and theories and discovering truth. I am in no way discouraging or trying to knock on anyone who is an active truther or who follows these lines of knowledge, trying to trace them back to their inverted source. There is a need for those who dive deep in that way, and there is a collective space and place for those who push up all types of information from the belly of the beast to force it to the light. That work is a whole different purpose and sight. I've done my part, but now I am called to remind us all of sacred and organic balance. The extreme of the light, the masters of that knowledge and seekers of truth for truth's sake, are needed at this time to call in clarity and to help us sort the mess in the middle ground. But it must be done with the intention of love. Love for the one truth and its one creator. Not love for humans or society or their system or the matrix or any portrayal of oneness like dogmas and religions. It must be for that great one truth that lies out there. The next part of this blog is about avoiding the hangman's noose of 3D-based physical evidence. And this is a big part of it. And it was a hard lesson for me to learn. So hear me out. There's a thin line between faith and doubt. But it is a critical marker in how we operate within our world. And more importantly, how we take in new information. If you're trapped in the 3D matrix, then you're reliant on physically provable and quote-unquote scientific evidence. Most truthers have broken out of this mind frame a bit. So I'm not going to get too deep here, but know that in your quest for truth, there will come a point when you hit a glass ceiling, and you'll be pressed to trust your gut. You know the point, I'm sure. It's that moment right there. If you let your mind talk circles around your gut and push on for more confirmation, more evidence, more external input, you are being tricked. The programming and the negative agenda are never fulfilled. Tap into your faith and don't allow your ego to run the research. Wisdom isn't always logical. Don't be that foolish in your thinking. However, sometimes we seekers of truth ignore our gut and walk right up to the platform where more information is dangling. We happily stick our necks and even kick out the chair on our own, all in hopes of more physical proof. We deny our faith, and in turn we are cut off of our life source, and we are left there choking for more external assistance. We literally handicap ourselves when we refuse to accept things as they are. Simultaneously, we end up all hung up in that energetic area and unable to move on, or sort of forcing a slow death on ourselves when we seek continual confirmation in the form of external validation. So, with this build-up sort of as a prep, I want to touch on very common, specific hangman's noose, where faith is tested to its utmost breaking point. The sly knot in this particular noose isn't even set to hang the seeker. It is lightly tied to ensure one who lacks true faith will never be released, nor be able to breathe freely again. This harness, so to speak, holds energetic bodies in a perpetual state of fear and lack, which allows the hangman to enjoy the show for as long as they please, gaining their charge and power all the while. So what is this sly noose that I'm talking about? The ancestral origin story mystery trap is what I'm calling it in this blog here. If we try to examine humanity sort of as a whole and attempt to build historic plots or timelines, things get very murky quick. There are way too many variables, loops, and black holes, all for the purpose of ensnaring bright minds. I have learned this the hard way over the last 20 years. Therefore, I'm not going to attempt to pin down any specifics in this post or really touch too much on the definitive key players in the steering of humanity across time. However, I will insert here, as since present moment, I have begun to attempt to pin down the specifics and talk about the archons, the history of the negative agenda, their path of destruction, I guess, is easily witnessed throughout history, and I have begun a series over on BitChute called The Negative Agenda's Tricks and Traps. And over there, I am beginning to peel away the layers and sort of build a timeline and talk about the death of cultures and this crushing of humanity that's taking place. But for this blog that I'm reading here in the audio for here, I didn't want to attempt to get into that so deeply. One thing I did want to bring up, although, was just to point out that the one thing that we do know for certain is we have been deceived. The who we are and the deception is purpose all along with the ultimate goal of who's done it, all of that is really up for grabs in the main arena of the world stage, and I just don't have the time or capacity to bring it into perspective right now. I personally do not allow for too much weight to be put in any theory or assumption, especially the ones handed down through quote-unquote history. the main world of academia or any of its promoted narratives. I also work to never worry about things beyond my control or my direct world. So I tend to stay neutral about issues taking place in that ulterior, external, global world. Live and let live, right? Granted, this is a work in progress. It is a practice, right? So of course, the illusions can still intrigue me. However, those tricks and rabbit holes can truly trap one for lifetimes and bury deep roots into the mind, which are hard to shake off unless you have a strong faith. But if you have faith, then you have no deep desire to venture down holes or seek the sleight of hand behind the magic trick. It just won't interest you. Because you've learned that initial lesson of realization. You have gained wisdom that comes with seeing truth hiding inside a lie. When you hold faith in the ultimate plan, you understand that no new positivity can be gained through repetitive experiences. They are creations which lack the spark of newness. They are merely distorted copies of something already done. This is like adding to the clutter in hopes of cleaning the room. It's counterintuitive. It doesn't work that way, right? Once you go back to that same place where your choice point was, or say where the truth is hiding in the lie, or where you've uncovered that truth, say, once you go back to that place, the spark of that initial lesson is gone. It's been felt already and known. It was not alchemized at that first realization. And so instead of dissipating the shadow or the conspiracy theory, say, it allows it to gain resistance. Now the positive charge is muted. The energy is not new. Either you must use your light to address and transmute the shadow now, or reduce the frequency of your light to dimmer, more comfortable lighting for the shadow you are now enabling. What I'm hopefully trying to explain in detail here is that notion that when we are seeking, say, after some thread of truth within this conspiracy theory that we've heard, say, and you're taking down and finding evidence, say, you could call it, when you are presented with these facts or the problem, say, of it, you have a chance to harness your light, to shine it, and to see clearly at that very first assessment of the shadow, say. The shadow's very tricky, right? The shadow is, it doesn't appreciate confrontation directly. And so, as a light worker, as somebody who is actually seeking truth and honesty, right, our upper hand, or our best path to a harmonious solution, is at that very first choice point. If you can shine your light as clear and as honest as possible and invoke service in that shadow, to offer it, to bring it into the light, that is the best and pretty much the only time we can catch a shadow off guard, and we can sort of get in their inner grounds, right? Before their boundaries are really put up very strong, is this initial confrontation, so to speak, when they've been caught And if we honestly see that, say, child trafficking, if we see that for what it is right when we know it's there, and we say, we see you, we know you're there, we need to fix this immediately. And we use our conscious awareness and power and light to look for true solutions at that point, to bring in clarity, justice, understanding, to really work to sort through it right at that moment. That's our best chance. That's when we can stay in positive alignment and do real alchemy work. But when we see that shadow and we, like I said, we don't make that initial choice to shine bright and to try to do the work immediately, we're catering to the shadow, right? We're enabling it, and we're allowing it to be seen as it wants to be seen. And in extension, right, we are allowing it to gain resistance against the light and to grow in power as the shadow. And so we don't really have that upper hand anymore. We're basically giving up our upper hand and going along with the negative flow. And then to take this one step further, to reiterate what I'm trying to explain here, is so, okay, now you know that, say, child trafficking is going on, and instead of, getting right into it in the moment and trying to do something to correct it in the direct moment, instead you are revisiting it and, looking for all of the conspirators behind it, trying to catch them in the act, trying to get as much records and information over the internet, and say like bank records or phone calls or confessions or whatever it is. You say, okay, we see this, but we're going to let it go for now, and we're going to try to infiltrate it and take it down from the inside, right? As true, honest being seeking a positive alignment, and this is absolutely opposite of seeking harmonious solutions, because we are negating our positive seeking, basically saying our, giving up our side of the bargain to cater to the shadow. Yeah, we think it's because we're helping it. We think it's because we'll catch it later, or we'll get more of it later in this way, but that in itself is a great trick and trap of the negative agenda, and they know for the most part that we're just going to dim our light, and in the dimming of our light we're actually feeding the overall negative agenda. So it's a win-win for them, really, when they keep us searching for excuses as why not to do the direct fix, why not to do the solution right now, right? And I've gotten a little away from my actual written blog here, but I do feel like a little bit of clarification is just needed, maybe a real world example in there to kind of push what I was attempting to explain. Sometimes in the rereading you realize, I kind of left out, or I didn't describe as well as I thought I was, the nitty-gritty of what I'm talking about. So back to my blog. Can you see how we literally hand over power to others, and how each transgression against you is actually a choice you've made for yourself? But as human beings, we are birthed into Earth's setting, designated a task of discernment, and bestowed a quest for intellect, wisdom, higher understanding to use in the active work of creating, manifesting energetic things into the physical world. We must start to realize and open our collective eyes to this trap and the trickery of rabbit holes, conspiracies, and the negative imagination space. The archonic agendas use this predictable naivety to lure humans of lower conscious awareness off into darker avenues in a lot of obvious ways with blatant infringements like mind control, energy weapons, negative frequencies, auditory distress. The list goes on infinitely in that arena. But here is an active practice of temperance, guiding my thought energy back and away from those infinite potentials, right? Don't give it my light, my awareness, my thought energy. This is how we begin to strengthen the collective and prepare to take on the negative agendas. That was the end of my blog. And here at the end, I would really just like to thank you for joining me and listening to this topic of conspiracies and rabbit holes. I think it is a very important topic to always come back to and always ask ourselves and remind ourselves of what kind of seeking, researching are we doing, right? What answers are you looking for and why? Because having a conscious awareness of what we're seeking is really how we get to where we're going. And unless you want to end up in a place that you don't want to be, I suggest that you take some time to evaluate and assess your current place and to take some time to define the space where you want to be at and how you do want to feel, and work to create that more for yourself in the present moment. Because at the end of the day, we all do know that the dark side is out there. We all know that there are these lies taking place in front of our eyes. And if we so choose to refuse our attention be used in those places, we would see the development stalling over there. And if the collective as a majority would align with a positive seeking of truth for truth's sake, for the good of all, right, for the best outcome, the most harmonious solution, we will see the negative wilt and hide because it cannot operate in full light. It does not want transparency. It does not want to be seen for all that it is, because at the end of the day, in the end of its day, it feels it is not worthy to be seen as it is. And that's very sad and heartbreaking, honestly. So, if you feel yourself compassionately looking at the dark side or the shadow, then know that you're doing beautiful light work. There's nothing wrong with having compassionate feelings towards the dark side. And it's not aligning with their negative thought patterns, their negative alignment, their negativity at all. It's the opposite of their frequency and vibration. And so we're doing a great service to the shadow when we feel compassionate empathy for their struggle and their denial of the one truth. And I think once more of the collective can start to understand this, can start to respect sacred boundaries and align with their own truth seeking, we'll see great changes taking place. Until then, we have a bit of chasing the tail in the shadows happening, and many wondering, why no change is happening. But it will come. It is coming. So it's best to prepare yourself and be ready. Have your inner compass strong and know how to seek truth, not shadows. Because as it gets darker right before the dawn, the negative agenda and the shadows, they're really going to try to impress this everlasting night upon us. So faith that dawn is coming, faith in the cycle, faith in eternal life, and unconditional love is really, what is on the line here and what is being tested. So I hope this has helped you to empower yours, and I hope it has inspired you to not only look at the negative agenda out there in the reflection of the world and have some compassion for it, but to also look at your own shadow and your own struggles and have great empathy and gratitude for them, and to actually work to help them feel better. Not to enable them, not to go along with their lies, not to get down in the shadows and have a pity party with them, but to stand there and hold your light on them, to let them know you're not going anywhere, to let them know there is strength and patience and moderation. There is a true, undeniable truth in holding your light. And so with that, I think I'll close out my podcast here for the day. Thank you so much for listening to this blog. If the negative agenda sparks your curiosity, you could hop over to BitChute and check out my videos on the tricks and traps over there. Or you can always find me on Telegram, t.me Marie Speaks. Over there, I mostly share positivity tips, infographics, and memes to keep our light and happiness. So if you're looking for that, you can find me over on Telegram, or if anything, I'm always directly on my website, amariespeaks.com. Over there, I have a plethora of free tips, resources, and references on all things introspection, spirituality, and happiness. So if you're seeking something, chances are you can find a doorway to that over at my site. So thank you so much for joining me, listening to my journey here. I thank you for your service to the collective as well, and I will catch you next time.